Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Well, welcome everyone tonight for this final night on Metta, and in particular on Maitreya Buddha. It's a wonderful expression in Thai, whoop wap, and it means that your mind is like jelly, and that's how I feel tonight. I've got whoop wap, so who knows what will come out. So let's begin. Last week, just to recap a little bit, last week I tried to suggest to you that that the translation of Metta or Maitreya or Maitreya that we use commonly, that is loving kindness, is really a bit weak, it's a bit soft, and it's the result of 19th century translations by people who really wanted to stay well and truly away from the Western Christian tradition, like the Rhys Davids, and so they were very afraid to use the word love for Metta or Maitreya. And so Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, who's very courageous and very with it, he reintroduced it and said, never mind about this loving kindness stuff, let's just call it love, recognizing that there are many, many kinds of love. And last week I mentioned to you things like agape and so on, which has the same idea of a love which is not actually grasping or greedy or attached to something, not hanging on to something. So this teaching of the Buddha on Metta, again, I tried to point out to you last week, and there are many, many texts in the suttas that deal with Metta, and the Buddha uses lots of different metaphors and similes. And I think we looked at one last week where the Buddha talks about, if you pull the udder of a cow just once, that's worth much more than offering, lots and lots of bowls of food. If you develop Metta for as long as it takes to tug on the teat of a cow, then that's worth much, much more. So for the Buddha, this teaching on Metta is really very, very central to what his teaching is about. And I gave you the example where he tells Ananda, don't say that my teaching is half and half. The whole of my teaching is about Metta or Maitreya or Maitreya, this loving kindness and this kind of good, special kind of friendship. So I thought we might look tonight for a little bit before we do our meditation practice at this figure called Maitreya. And I printed off just a few, well, you can see 6 images, just to give you an idea of how confusing this is. Because just on those sheets that you have, the first one in the upper left is actually from Nepal, and it's a kind of Tibetan style image, but it's very similar to one that comes from Sri Lanka that was discovered a long time ago. And Maitreya, he wears a stupa in his crown. He has a crown, he has lovely hair, often parted in the center. He's wearing a Brahmanic cord, and he's got a scarf belt around his waist, and he's moving towards the what's called Tribhanga position or posture, the way he's standing. So very graceful, very elegant. And then underneath him is the black and white line drawing, again, very Tibetan in style, and he's shown sitting on a throne. And it's very common for Maitreya to be shown sitting on a throne rather than sitting cross-legged. And he's teaching, and it's a very formal kind of thing. Those of you that have been to Thailand might remember in Nakhon Pathom, there's a very famous chedi, a very famous stupa or dagaba. And in that stupa, there's a huge image of the Buddha sitting like this. A very, very beautiful image without all the ornaments and everything, but just sitting sort of Western style, really, sitting on a chair or on a throne and facing out from the stupa itself. So these are sort of, if you like, more formal representations of this bodhisattva. Yeah? And then if you look underneath, there's the fat guy with the bag. Yeah? And that's also Maitreya. This is a wonderful Chinese expression of Maitreya. He looks nothing like the other two above him. Yeah? And this is the result of a conflation of a story where a monk who was very famous in China gets confused by the people who support him and who look after him for Maitreya Buddha. They think because he has the stories, he has this sack, people give him all sorts of things as he's walking from village to village because he didn't like living in monasteries. And people would give him things, he'd put them in the sack, and no matter how many things he was given, the sack never got filled up. But as soon as he went to another village, if people said, oh, can I have you got? And he'd always say, yeah, sure. And out it would come, whatever it was. And so he would give it to people. And so he was shown in this form, but this is both, by the way, in China and Japan, this form exists. And if you go to a very traditional Chinese temple, the very first image you'll see, apart from the world guardians, will be Maitreya Buddha sitting at the front with the great big belly, smiling and with the big earlobes and everything. So you see that before you get in to see the Buddha, right? So this is like, it's like a foretaste of what's coming next. So you walk past Maitreya Buddha to go into the more formal hall and so on. But it's a kind of reminder that, okay, you've got all this formality going on here, but this is what's coming. Yeah. This is who's coming next. Yeah. This jolly, happy, welcoming, smiling, beaming Buddha. Right. This is Maitreya Buddha. It's interesting because in mainland China, this is really, really common. And if you go to Chinese temples in Thailand, you'll see this figure all the time. Like if you go down Yaowarat Road in Chinatown and go into some of the temples, you'll always see this image of Maitreya Buddha sitting there. But strangely, if you go to Taiwan, it's not so popular. It's a little bit more sort of formal, and I don't know why, but that's the case. And then in the upper right-hand corner is the Buddha with the 5 children leaping all over him. And this is a very popular image as well. And there are numerous explanations as to what this is. You know, some people say this is the 5 senses. Yeah? And Maitreya Buddha, not bothered by any of them. You know, they're all just playing around him, and he's having a lovely time. And in a way, he's kind of entertaining them, yeah, but not sort of attached to them, not caught up with them. Other people see them as something that's a bit dangerous, but again, they have no effect on the Maitreya Buddha. Then there's a little Japanese, I think it's a woodblock, but I'm not sure. And there you've got Maitreya Buddha, and he's taking part in a little procession with the kids following around with banners and lanterns and so on. And he's having a great time. He's laughing and carrying on and just enjoying himself. And he's dressed in rags. You know? And then the bottom one is a very, very beautiful, very formal Japanese image of Maitreya Buddha. Miroku, I think it is. Does anyone know? I think that's the name in Japanese, Miroku. Yeah? Anyway, this is a really very, very beautiful, very elegant image. And the Buddha is shown, notice he's sitting on a seat or on a throne. He's got one leg drawn up and he's got his hand like this, as though he's thinking. Yeah? And the idea is he's thinking about when he makes his appearance in the world. Yeah? He's getting ready to make his appearance in the world. So we've got, just in those 6 illustrations, you've got very different ideas about who this bodhisattva is, Maitreya, and very different ways of representing him. Now, it's interesting to note that Maitreya is the only bodhisattva who appears in all the 3 traditions of Buddhism. He appears in Theravada, in the Digha Nikaya, in the Kakawati Sutta number 26. And of course, he appears in Mahayana and in Vajrayana as well. Yeah. So he's the only one. Yeah. There's no Kuan Yin in the Theravadan tradition, yeah? Although Kuan Yin is popular in the Theravadan tradition, but Kuan Yin never figures in any of the suttas, but Maitreya does. Yeah? And Maitreya in Digha Nikaya 26, this is the Buddha talking to a group of monks, and he says, he's talking about what's going to happen in the future. And you'll remember there are lots of, I suppose we could call them millenarian sort of prophecies or eschatological prophecies, you know, like what's going to happen in the future. And here, put into the mouth of the Buddha, is this one. And the Buddha says, the Blessed One named Metta or Maitreya, yeah, will arise in the world, perfected, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world. Of course, these are all epithets that we give to the Buddha. Yeah, like when you chant the Itipiso, yeah, they're descriptions of the Buddha. So here's the Buddha saying to the audience that he's talking to, that this is the person who's going to come after him. This is the Buddha who's due to arrive next. Supreme guide for those who wish to train, a teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. And then the Buddha says, just as I have arisen today. So this next Buddha is going to be just like me, except for this one thing, that his name is Metta or Maitreya, which means this love. Yeah, the Buddha whose essence is this quality of love. Yeah? Whereas the Buddha that we talk about often, we often think more in terms of wisdom or insight or something like that. Yeah? Certainly compassion. Yeah? There's that wonderful poem. I can't think of the name of the poet now. Very early Buddhist poet who talks about who comes this way, whose eyes are moist with compassion. It's a very beautiful poem, very long poem about the Buddha for our time. So the Buddha says, he will realize with his own insight this world, with its gods, Maras and Brahmas, this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, gods and humans, and make it known to others. Good in the middle, good in the end, good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Yeah? Which again are all things that we attribute to the Buddha's Dhamma, to Sakyamuni's Dhamma. Yeah? And he will speak in such a way that it's well presented and well phrased. He will reveal a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure, just as I do today. He will look after many thousands of practitioners, just as I look after many hundreds today. So he's the Buddha we call the historical Buddha, referring to the next Buddha and saying he's going to have even more disciples than I've got now. And then he goes on to talk about the birth of this Buddha and so on. But it follows exactly the same pattern, except for the name and for the fact that the Buddha says this next Buddha is going to have many, many more disciples. Yeah? Now, when you get something like that, and then later, of course, you get some references to Maitreya Buddha in the other schools of Buddhism, and they get elaborated upon, it's not hard to see why people were attracted to the idea of this next Buddha, who's the Buddha to come, whose very sort of essence or core is this quality of love, you know, love for all sentient beings. And so what begins to happen is that people begin to switch, not switch their allegiance, but they begin to switch their focus on the next Buddha. So you've got this Buddha now, and then people start thinking, well, this next Buddha is going to be pretty special. Yeah? And so some people then decide to try to get themselves reborn into the heaven where Maitreya Buddha lives at the moment, right? And Maitreya Buddha is living, it's believed at the moment, in the Tushita heaven, which is where our Buddha was living until he descended and became a human being and then the Buddha. So as time went on and as these beliefs, because that's really what they are, yeah, as these beliefs began to develop, people began to think, well, maybe I can in some way hasten the arrival of Maitreya Buddha. Yeah. So kind of, get in touch with him and hurry things up, get a move on. So they did. They tried. Well, not they did. They tried various practices, various kinds of meditation, various ascetic practices, which of course the Buddha doesn't approve of, but nonetheless they tried them as a way of kind of inducing, so to speak, inducing the birth of this Buddha from the Tushita heaven. And in some schools of Buddhism, this became something that was really very important for some practitioners and some schools. It also caused, and we'll look at this in just a minute, caused a lot of problems as well. Caused a great deal of suffering for some people. But let me begin by telling you a little story. It's a very important, very famous story about the Buddha Maitreya and about one of these disciples who decided that if he practiced in a certain way, he could force, in a way, Maitreya Buddha to appear, to arrive early. Yeah. And this, he was a monk and he was from the university at Nalanda, and he's a very famous teacher, and he's one of the founders of the Yogacara school of Buddhism, and his name is Asanga. And the story, it's a very beautiful story, but it's a complicated story. His mother and he had a stepbrother, Vasubandhu, and his mother, when he was born, she went to somebody and she asked the person to tattoo, so it'd be very popular nowadays, tattoo on his tongue a sacred syllable. So the tattoo artist put a sacred syllable on his tongue. And the idea was, this was, in a way, this meant that he was going to become a teacher of the Dhamma. And only special things would come from his mouth. So Asanga becomes more and more and more interested in Maitreya Buddha. And he goes and takes teachings from different people. And then he decides, okay, the only thing to do is I must go and I'll do these practices and I'll be able to get in touch with Maitreya Buddha. So he goes off and he finds himself a cave in which to practice. He goes into the cave and he's got great resolve. He's going to go into the cave and he says, I'm going to stay here until I encounter Maitreya Buddha. So he goes into the cave and he sets up a routine of doing meditation practice, doing pujas, ritual offerings and so on, liturgies. And he's in the cave, in the story, remember, these stories, that's what they are, they're stories. He spends 3 years in the cave and nothing happens. So after 3 years, he thinks, okay, I think I've had enough. So he comes out of the cave, and as he starts to leave the cave, now there are many different versions of this story, but as he starts to leave the cave, he turns and he notices that there's a ledge over the entrance to the cave, and there's water dripping from up above, and it's dripped and it's made a groove in the stone. And he thinks, okay, if water can do that to stone, I can go back into that cave and I can really make this happen. So he goes back in again. 3 more years go past, nothing happens. So he comes out again. And as he's walking away, he sees a bird land on a ledge near the cave. And he notices that this bird, from landing all the time in the cave, has created a smooth spot on the stone. So again, he thinks, okay, if a bird can do that, then I should be able to do this. So back he goes again. 3 more years go past, nothing happens. And he comes out again feeling very sort of despondent. And he encounters an old man with a huge iron pole, a bit like one of those RSJs there, yeah? An iron pole, and he's got a piece of silk, and he's rubbing the pole with the piece of silk. And Asanga says to him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm making needles, sewing needles." And he said, "Oh, come on, you know." No, I'm making sewing needles," he says, you know. And Asanga says, "No, you're not." And the old man has a leather pouch here, and he opens it up and shows him all these beautiful sewing needles that he's made, you know, by rubbing this steel pole with a piece of silk. So he thinks to himself, if that guy can do that, I can do this. So he goes back in again. So I think we're now up to 12 years, aren't we? He's spent in the cave. So he comes out of the cave, and by this time he's really had it, you know. And he thinks, this is, you know, I've just wasted my time, and I've done the very best that I could, but nothing's happened. So he decides to give it all up, and he decides to go to town. You know? And I don't know where the town was, but anyway, he sets off for the town. And as he goes into the town, on the side of the road, he sees a dog which has been injured, which is lying on its side and can't get up because its back legs have been very badly injured. And the dog's rump is being eaten away by maggots. And he looks at this dog, and he just feels such pity for the dog, you know, and he thinks, right, how can I help this dog, you know? And so he thinks, well, okay, I'll just pick the maggots off. But then he thinks, well, if I do that, I'll kill them, because I'll be, you know, I have to squeeze them to take them off. So I can't really do that. And then maybe I could just blow them off, but no, you can't do that either. So then he thinks, if I had another piece of meat, I could lure them off, right? So he thinks, oh, okay, another piece of meat. So I'll have to get a knife of some sort, right? And some meat. So he goes into the town, and there's a very Tibetan story. He goes into the town and he goes to the pub, right? I don't know what a Tibetan pub looked like, but anyway, he goes, and the pub, the innkeeper is a lady, right? So you've got to start to put all the bits of the story together. So here's this monk. He's got his alms bowl. He's got his shikara, the stick that he carries to warn animals on the road that he's walking, so, you know, move out of the way. You've seen those sticks. Siddhigarbha often carries them, you know, and they rattle. So he's got this, or a walking staff, it doesn't really matter. He goes in and he goes into the pub, somewhere that monks are not allowed to go. And the only person in the pub's this lady who's the barmaid. Yeah? And he says to her, have you got a knife I can borrow? And she says, I got a fantastic knife, you know. I've got this gold knife here, you know. He says, can I borrow it? She said, you have to give me something, and then you can borrow it. And he says, well, I haven't got anything. Give me your bowl and your staff, right? Now, these are his two symbols of being a monk, right? So he hands them over to her, and she gives him the knife. So back he goes to where the dog is, and then he thinks, oh, I should have got some meat. Yeah. I'll just cut a little bit of meat off my thigh here. Yeah. That has all sorts of symbolic meanings, but anyway. So he cuts a bit of meat off himself, a bit of muscle, and puts it down like this, and the maggots just look. There's no way they're going to take that. Yeah. So finally, he thinks, I don't know, what can I do? And then he thinks, okay, what about if I get down and I put my tongue out and let them crawl onto my tongue, yeah, so that they'll then come off the dog. Right? Such a good story. Because you've got to remember that dogs are considered to be very, very unclean, right, to begin with. Yeah. So he gets down. Remember, he's got the sacred syllable on his tongue, right, which should never be put in contact with anything that's polluted, right? Gets down, right down low. Imagine the smell as well, because all the flesh is rotting away. Out comes the tongue to get the first maggot off, and the dog disappears. And there, standing in front of him, is Maitreya Buddha. And Asanga sort of looks like this, and then he says, "Where the hell have you been?" And Maitreya Buddha just looks at him and he says, "I've been in that cave for 12 years, you know." He says, "And now you turn up." You know? Now you come here, you know. So he's a bit annoyed, even though finally Maitreya's appeared before him. Yeah? And he says, "I did all those practices, I did all that meditation, and and you turn up now." You know? And Maitreya Buddha says to him, "I've been in the cave the whole time." And Asanga says, "No, you haven't." He says, "Yes." He says, "I have. I've been with you the whole time." And Asanga says, no, I was in there all by myself. And Maitreya Buddha then says, "Remember when you went into the cave on the first day, you were carrying in your alms bowl some curry and you tripped and you dropped it." And he lifts his robe up, Maitreya Buddha, and says, "Look at this, the great curry stain down his robe." Yeah. And then Asanga thinks, "Wow, okay, wow." And then he says, "But are you really Maitreya Buddha?" And Maitreya Buddha says, all right, you can go and ask somebody if you like, you know." So he tells Asanga to pick him up and put him on his shoulder and carry him into town where he's just been. So he does, and he walks into town and he says to people he meets in the town, "Who's this?" And they say, "Can't see anything. What are you talking about, you know?" He's, "No, sitting on my shoulder." "No, I can't see a thing." Yeah. So he turns around and goes back, right, to where the poor old dog was, and puts Maitreya down. And then Maitreya says, "Now look, what do you want? Yeah. After all this, what is it that you want?" He says, "I want to receive your teachings." It's a great story. And Maitreya Buddha says, "Okay, hang on to my robe." Yeah. And off they go into the Tushita heaven, where he gives him his special teachings on Maitreya Buddha, on love, and then brings him back to earth. Yeah? That's the story. Now, if you think about that story, there's so much in it. Yeah? The contrast between what is sacred and what's not sacred, what's polluted, what's pure, yeah? What you cling on to and what you have to give up. Yeah? So all his obsessive behaviors in the cave, doing all the practice, all the kind of ego stuff in a way, like I'm doing this and therefore you should appear. Yeah. All of that gets him nowhere. The thing that actually brings Maitreya Buddha to him, or allows him to see Maitreya Buddha, is this act of compassion and love with the dog, with this creature that's considered to be really, disgusting and polluting and all the rest of it. Yeah? And giving up the things that, if you like, give him his identity. The two things that belong to the monk. He has to hand them over, and hand them over to someone that he shouldn't even be with. The barmaid. Such a good story. If you sit down with it and just sort of make your way through it. So this was the story of Asanga and his meeting with Maitreya Buddha. And then he's given the teachings on developing loving kindness. Yeah? And then he can give them to other people. So that's a kind of, it's a classic story. It's a classic example. There are variations on it, but that's if you like, that's the outline of the story. Now, unfortunately, the figure of Maitreya Buddha over a long period of time got caught up in other less spiritual things. So people began to use the idea of Maitreya Buddha for political reasons. So in China, for example, there was an empress who told everyone she was Maitreya Buddha. Right? She just made a declaration, like, I'm Maitreya Buddha. Yeah? It didn't go down too well, and it didn't last too long. Yeah? And in China too, you might remember the Boxer Rebellion, that you would have read about. the White Lotus Society and so on, they were connected with these millenarian movements to do with Maitreya. The idea that if they got rid of all these Westerners and so on, that Maitreya Buddha would appear. Now, there were several Chinese emperors who claimed either to be Maitreya Buddha or that they were about to become Maitreya Buddha. In Burma today, or Myanmar, we've got terrible, terrible suffering going on, terrible problems with the military and ordinary people. Myanmar has a long tradition of people claiming to be Maitreya Buddha and leading rebellions against the state, and some kings declaring that they were Maitreya Buddha, and therefore people should do whatever they said. In Burma, when this happened I think it was in about the 17th century, the king declared himself Maitreya Buddha, and the monks said, "No, you're not." So there was this huge standoff between the monks and the king. And finally, the king had to give in because the lay community supported the monks and didn't quite believe that the king, with all of his kind of foibles and grasping and everything, was Maitreya Buddha. So you can see how people have taken the idea of Maitreya Buddha, this wonderful being who's about to come, and tried to use it by making themselves or making somebody Maitreya Buddha. In Thai history, this has also been the case. The Thai king prior to the present dynasty, the Chakri dynasty, a man called Thaksin, he was the one who established Bangkok, which eventually went over the river and became, he established Thonburi, which eventually spread over the river and became Bangkok. He was involved, he was born in Ayutthaya, I think it was, and then was living in Ayutthaya, and then eventually moved from Ayutthaya down. He was involved in wars with the Burmese, involved with stealing the Emerald Buddha, the famous Emerald Buddha, which was actually belonged to the Laos. But they helped themselves to that and took it to Bangkok. It's never gone back, of course. He even stole dancing girls from down south, from near Nakhon Si Thammarat, because he thought they were really good dancing girls, so he brought them back to the palace. But he became a kind of religious fanatic. And so he then began telling people that he was Maitreya Buddha, because everyone was waiting for this, because they knew that when this next Buddha came, everything would improve, everything would be wonderful. So he announced that he was Maitreya Buddha. Well, he fell victim to a coup, just like we're seeing at the moment. And the coup, the organisers are the present dynasty, in the Chakri dynasty in Thailand. So the very first one. And it's a really strange story, because he was the king and you weren't allowed to touch the king. So he was put inside a velvet sack and clubbed to death so that no one actually touched him. This was their way of, if you like, of respecting the fact that he was the king. And then the first Chakri king took over. Now, there is another story that he was actually beheaded, but the velvet sack one's much nicer, much more interesting. So you can see then how people have taken this idea of Maitreya Buddha because of what it represents. Now, I think that what they've done is to literalize a metaphor, that they've taken the idea of Maitreya Buddha and how everything's going to be wonderful when Maitreya Buddha appears, but they're thinking in earthly terms. They're thinking in terms of, oh, it'll be great, everything will be really good, we'll have the internet, we'll have this, we'll have that, we'll have cars that fly and all that sort of stuff, and Amazon will deliver parcels from drones and so on. That's really what they were thinking of for the most part. And there are descriptions in various texts of how even the land will become completely level. There won't be mountains anymore, it'll just be all smooth. And one description says it'll be like lapis lazuli, everywhere. And there'll be plenty of water, everyone will have lots of food to eat and so on. So you can see the sort of projecting of this idea of some sort of perfect future. But it seems to me that they've completely misled themselves. That this Buddha, whose name Maitreya or Maitreya means love, has nothing to do with that kind of thing. So they've read about him, they've heard about him, and they've decided that what they want is, if you like, what do we call it in America? The success evangelism. What do they call it? Prosperity. The prosperity gospel. Where if you do this, and then God will give you all these things. There's some crazy Buddhists who believe that too in Japan. That if you do all sorts of chanting and so on, that you can chant for BMW or Mercedes, and this is true, but this totally misses the point. When we approach the idea and the image and the teaching about Maitreya Buddha or Metta Buddha, I think we need to really rethink it and leave those elements aside, leave those elements out. And so it leaves us asking the question, given what the Buddha said about Maitreya Buddha, when will this Buddha turn up? When will this Buddha come? And I want to suggest to you that this Buddha will come when you practice in such a way that you become Maitreya Buddha. That you're wasting your time if you're waiting for this Maitreya Buddha to arrive from the Tushita heaven. That this Maitreya Buddha can only appear when you transform yourself. When your chitta, when your heart and mind becomes just love. You still use loving kindness if you like it, but it seems to me it's a bit wet. Then Maitreya Buddha appears, and I think that's encapsulated in that wonderful story of Asanga. That you can do all sorts of things, for the wrong reasons, and even it might appear that you're doing them for the right reason. Remember that Asanga was a great famous teacher at the university. So this would have been a real feather in his cap. Like you can imagine, I did these practices and then Maitreya appeared. And that's not what happened. I met a dog on the side of the road, suffering. I gave up the symbols of who I am or who I think I am. I gave up the idea of this sacred syllable and put it instead in contact with suffering. And that's when Maitreya Buddha appeared. So it seems to me that it's a great challenge to us, to try to, in some way, embody this teaching within ourselves, and not get caught up in the eschatological or the millenarian sort of scenario. Not keep thinking, oh, this Buddha is going to appear. You hear people say, oh, in 60,000 years, Maitreya will appear. Or even more outrageous lengths of time, Maitreya will appear. It seems to me that misses the point. Just as when we practice metta meditation, the point is not just to recite words, but to actually generate that kind of heart and mind, so that we actually, in a way, infuse our own hearts and minds with this quality, so that it becomes. I sometimes say it becomes completely natural, but what I really should say is that we take away all the dross and see that that's what's actually there. Because you get a taste of that. If you see, for most people, for 99% of people, if you see somebody suffering, there is a movement within the heart and the mind. Now, some people, of course, they can just walk past, but most people, there is that movement. Or there's that in Pali, the idea of the fluttering of the heart when it sees suffering in others. So we practice metta to actually let that become manifest, so that we do that all the time without thinking. So we no longer have to go around. Remember what the Buddha said about gifts and gift giving. Yeah? That the perfection of giving is to get to the point where there's no longer any giver, no longer any gift, and no longer any receiver. Yeah? So similarly, when we practice metta, at first, yes, it's clunky and we kind of think, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. And we recite the words precisely so that we kind of bed them in to ourselves. Yeah. Because it's hard just to sit there and be thinking, oh, love, love, yeah. But if we make it specific and we kind of create that repetition within the heart and the mind, then it begins to sink in. Yeah? Just like learning anything, except that this is actually entering into the chitta, the heart and the mind. So it's very important to approach the practice, I think, excuse me, with that kind of attitude and with that kind of understanding. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that that's all that there is to be said about metta or Maitreya or anything like that. But that's an approach that you can take that can be useful and that can produce good fruit. Yeah? Good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Yeah? If we make the effort to practice. And that's why I think it's good when you're doing your meditation practice to always include a little bit of metta practice. Yeah? Either at the beginning or at the end. Yeah? Or to do, of course, more formal metta practice. Again, I keep coming back to Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh because I think he has some really very, very valuable insights for us today in the 21st century. And he has a lot of these repetitive phrases that he uses with his students, in order to inculcate or to develop metta, this loving quality within the heart and the mind, rather than just have an idea about metta, and think, oh yes, it's a good thing, but to actually experience it and to express it. I've told you before, there was a monk that I knew many years ago now, and he was writing a book on loving kindness and compassion, and he was a very well-known scholar, monk. And then I asked him something about it, and he said, oh, I gave up because I realized I had none. Yeah, I realized I had none. So you could write about it. Oh yes, scholarly tomes and how wonderful this is, and quote passages from the suttas and all the rest of it. But to his credit, he said, no, I gave up because I realized when I was working on it that I had none. So I better get some, and then maybe write about it. So that's what I'd like to offer you tonight. I know it's a bit all over the place and it's a bit sort of squashed up, but even if you just do nothing but go home with that story, and also I'd like to suggest to you that when you go home with those illustrations tonight, that you think what you would look like. Yeah? How would you put yourself there? Imaginatively. Yeah? You can't be any of these. They're already taken. Right? So how would you be there in such a way that you express this quality of metta or love or loving kindness, if you like that way of putting it? How would you express it? And maybe, when you go home, you might even sit down and try writing about it. How you experience it. Another good thing to do, of course, is to reflect on how you've received it from others. Yeah, this quality. And all of us as human beings, we can always think of someone or someones who've shown us great love and loving kindness. Yeah. It might be a parent, it might be a partner, it might be a child, a friend. Yeah. But don't go into the negative side. I think I said to you last week about the student when the Tibetan teacher was teaching and said, oh, we should all reflect on the love of our mother, talking about the Buddha's image of the love of the mother in the Metta Sutta. And this student said, I hate my mother. And the teacher said, we're not talking about your mother. So So try whatever skillful ways you can, you know, to think about embodying that yourself, and to think about, okay, how can I become, or how can I manifest Maitreya Buddha? Yeah. We're not talking about celestial bodhisattvas or anything like that. We're talking about what the Buddha said the qualities of this Buddha will be. Just as, you know, when we chant the Iti Piso, okay, we recite the qualities of the Buddha, okay, the qualities of the Dhamma, the qualities of the Sangha. Okay. And remember, when the Buddha taught this, he said, if you can really grasp this or really see this, yeah, this is the mirror of the Dhamma. Yeah, you won't have any more questions, yeah, because you will have become those qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So in something of the same way, this special quality of metta, this love, which lies at the heart of the teaching of the Buddha, it has to be embodied in us. Yeah? Not just in ideas or thoughts or anything else, but it has to be, it's as though we have to infuse ourselves with it. And it's not easy to do, because, you know, we've got all the things that we hang on to, cling to, and you know, greed, hatred, delusion, and ignorance. But it's worth making an effort to do it, and to see the effect that it has on people, let alone the effect it has on yourself. So I might pause for a minute and see if anyone would like to ask anything, or they'd like to say anything before we do meditation practice. Go ahead.
I'm curious about the Asanga. That if he hadn't done all the 12 years of ascetic practice, would he have uncovered that compassion? Like, if he hadn't done that and he walked past the dog 12 years earlier, would he have felt the same compassion? And like, the thing is, if it's inside of us, he would have, except did he need to clear away what was concealing it by doing some kind of practice, whether it was, as I said, a practice in a cave. Like, I think I'm kind of interested, is the point in
what
the
do you
story.
Think?
Well, I think it was there, and he would have done that for the dog even if he'd not done the 12 years in the cave. But, you know.
But we don't know, do we?
I doubt it.
You think he wouldn't? Yeah.
We need all the kicks in life to learn.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
I
not
don't
saying
know,
therefore we don't
because
need to do any practice, but
yeah,
you know.
because the story is a kind of, it's contained, isn't it?
Yeah.
So part of the story is the time in the cave and then coming out and experiencing the dog. So whether or not, you know, no practice in the cave would have produced the same result, who can say? That's not part of the story. So, yeah.
I picture myself standing above the dog. What would I do? And to do what Asanga done, there has to be a lot of work behind. Without it, we don't get anywhere. And also, dukkha. That's the best teacher. And 12 years, that was dukkha for him. The first Thai story I heard, Mrs. Jackson, 1968, First Buddhist Society's secretary.
Yeah.
She was saying, now boys, listen, there was this rich lady in Thailand, and her servant was bringing in the tea, and he dropped it. And then she jumped up and she said, "You idiot, can't you see I'm doing loving kindness meditation?" I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Well, there's a story in the sutras that's almost exactly the same as that. Yeah. Where a lady has a reputation for being terribly pious, but she beats her servant over the head with a pestle. Is it a mortar? A pestle, isn't it? Yeah. And then the servant runs out into the street with blood streaming down and says, see what this pious woman has done. Yeah, this holy woman. Yeah. I think I've told you before, a friend who was a monk in the Tibetan tradition was once living in, monastery in Dharamsala. I can't remember the name of it now. But anyway, he was there and he became very ill. And he was so sick that he couldn't really leave his room. And he was in his room for maybe 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah. And then finally he began to sort of recover a little bit. And he opened the door of his room one day and he saw another one of the Western monks going past. And he said to him, do you think you could come with me down to the tea shop, because I've been sick for a couple of weeks and I haven't had anything and I'd like maybe have some sweet tea or something like that. And the monk said to him, oh no, I haven't got time now. We're going to do loving kindness practice. And that's a true story. Yeah? Yeah, I think that illustrates it perfectly. I haven't got time for you, right? I'm doing this thing, which is all about me practicing. So he told me he staggered down to the tea shop and had some tea, but he never forgot that response from this person who was so busy doing loving kindness practice. So.
Yeah, just one more thing. Ayakema usually finish the day with loving kindness meditation. And when we finished it, a young girl asked the question, Aya, if I send my love to my dead mother and father, will they receive it? And I was surprised by her answer. I had great respect for her, the best teachers she belonged. And she said, no, don't think like that, because I'm not sure when you do loving kindness meditation, even the person next to you will receive. Same with the dead people. I always love to send my love to the dead relatives, parents.
Yeah, why not?
So, Pat, would you receive my loving kindness if I send it to you? Would you feel it?
I think so.
But she's not dead
you.
either.
Thank you very much. I won't tell my wife, she might be jealous.
All right, so let's do some practice together then, and see how we go. So the first and very important thing is just to let yourself settle. Let the busyness of the body settle. Let your body become calm and relaxed and centered. Let the busyness of the mind settle. Recognize that you're giving yourself a gift by giving yourself this time to do your practice. So don't steal from yourself, but be generous, be kind, give yourself the time. Recognize that you give yourself this time for your own well-being and happiness, and in the words of the Buddha, for the well-being and happiness of all other suffering sentient beings. So just slowly and gently resting into the body, resting into the breath. You can't practice metta with tension or tightness or force. Just resting into the body, resting into the breath. Let yourself feel the body settling and resting. Be grateful that for these few minutes, you can just let the body rest. And you can allow the mind to follow the body into that peaceful, restful state. And perhaps consider with gratitude your own body. All that this body has been through since the time of your birth and even before your birth. And allow that gratitude just to develop within your own heart and mind. Being grateful for the body. Being grateful for the breath which sustains it. Being aware of the air becoming the breath. Being aware of not owning the breath, just as you don't own the air. Not owning the body. Just allowing the body and the breath to rest. And you can allow the words of this practice to revolve within your own heart and mind, to flow throughout the body, the heart, the mind. You can add to them, you can take away from them. May I be light and peaceful in my body, heart, and mind. And let yourself experience that lightness in the resting of the body, the heart, the mind. May I be free from accidents and from illness. May I preserve and protect my well-being. May I be free from anger, free from all unwholesome states of mind. May I be free from worry in these very moments. Resting into the body, resting into the breath. May I be able to look at myself with the eyes of compassion, not judgment. How wonderful to have this body, to experience this breath, to know this heart and mind. May I look on myself with the eyes of compassion. May I be able to see and touch the seeds of joy and happiness within this body, heart, and mind. Resting deeply into the body, into the breath, into the heart and mind. May I learn each day how to nourish myself with joy. How to touch my heart and mind with all that is wholesome and skillful and beneficial. May I be able to come to each day fresh and free. Resting into the body, resting into the breath. May I not fall into indifference. May my body, heart and mind be alive, joyful and free. May I be able to walk between attachment and aversion. Now, while still resting within this body, heart and mind, just gently call to mind the other people sitting with you tonight or those sitting at home. And allow these thoughts and feelings and wishes to flow throughout your body, heart and mind, and to touch them. May you too be light, joyful and free within your body, heart and mind. May you be free from accidents and illness of all sorts. May you dwell in safety. May you be free from fear and worry. May you be free from all unwholesome states of heart and mind. Resting ever more deeply into the body, the heart, the mind. May you know how to look at yourself with the eyes of understanding and compassion. May you truly be able to see and touch the seeds of joy and happiness within your own body, heart and mind. May you be able to nourish yourself, your body, your heart, your mind with joy each day. May you be able to enter each day with great freedom, freshness, and aliveness. May you not get caught up in indifference to your own suffering and the suffering of others. May you walk peacefully between attachment and aversion. May we and all beings be able to live with great lightness, with great joy in body, heart, and mind. May we and all beings not be weighed down by worries, may we and all beings be free from worries and attachments of all kinds. May we and all beings be truly free from anger, from unwholesome states of mind, from all kinds of fear and worry. May we and all beings look at ourselves and others with the eyes of understanding and compassion. May we and all beings find, touch, and encourage the growth of the seeds of joy and happiness within our bodies, hearts, and minds. May we and all beings be able to nourish ourselves with joy each day. May we find joy in the simplest of things. May we and all beings enter each day lively, fresh, and free. May we and all beings not fall into indifference. And may we be able to walk straight between aversion and attachment. May we and all beings water the seeds of joy and happiness within our bodies, hearts, and minds each and every day. May we look on each other with the eyes of understanding and compassion. Resting into the body, resting into the breath, into the heart and the mind. Offering to yourself and to others love and compassion arising within this body, heart and mind. Receiving from others love and compassion flowing out of their bodies, hearts and minds. May Maitreya Buddha manifest within this body, heart and mind. May every movement of this body, heart and mind be filled with loving kindness, with love and compassion. Letting yourselves rest once again into the body, into the breath. Letting the heart and mind remain open and spacious, expansive. So I hope you might think about how you individually, you yourself, can bring about this prophecy of the Buddha. How you can manifest Maitreya Buddha within your own body, heart and mind. How you can become this Buddha of love and compassion and not give up, not fall into despair or indifference, not fall into attachment or aversion. But in the words of that little practice, try to enter each and every day alive, light, free, joyful. And try to keep that going within the body, the heart and the mind. And so each day, little by little, the heart and mind will fill with this quality of Metta or Maitreya. So we might finish at this point. Yeah.
Just one question. When is Maitreya booked into the Buddhist library? It's gonna be a Thursday or Tuesday? When is the Buddha Maitreya booked into the Buddhist library? Because I don't want to miss the day.
He's already here.
Yeah.
And he'll be going home with you when you go home to make some wonderful
Yes. Strudel.
strudel. Yes, when you're making the strudel, if you look down, you'll see the stain on Maitreya's robes.
I hope he's gonna give me recipes.
Ah, well, there you are. He might too. He might make a heavenly strudel. Yes. So, thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Kainan, and thank you, everyone else. And we'll just do a little blessing to finish. Yeah. Yattha varivahapura paripurenti sagarang he wang me wangi todinang petanang upakapati chitang patitang tunghang kippamewa samijatu sabe purenti sankapa chintopana soyata mani jatira soyata sapitio haviva chanto saparoko vina satuma te bhava vantarayo sukiti kayuko Awa abiwa thana sili sani chang utang pachai hino ja taro dhamma vatanti ayuwano sukang palang bhavatu sabha mangalang rakantu sabha devata sabha bhuta nupavena sata sohoti bhavantu te bhavatu sabha mangalang Rakantu sabha devata sabha dhammanubhavena sada soti bhavantu te bhavatu sabha mangalang Rakantu sabha devata sabha sankanubhavena sada soti bhavantu te.